I guess that's what really needs to be honed in on.
Right. So you already you already started talking about like the psychosocial side of things. So let's just go in there. You said that it has to do with psychology. That is the underlying factor that needs to be discussed. That's the that's the big thing that we need to talk about. It's not about the particular program that you're on, whether it's high fat, high carb, low carb, high protein. It's about the psychology of it. So let's just go ahead and segue into that. And I'm sure I'll have a lot more to add on the psychological side of things. But what were your thoughts on that, just to get us started?
Sure. So, I mean, obviously, the psychology is it's essentially bring the person back to reality, and I don't want to say that I'm giving excuse to radical diets, because that is dangerous. I don't want these people that are compliant to these radical diets and really it's just the life hack that's working for them. I don't want them to stay on these diets, right? When you're on a true ketogenic diet where you're 90% fat, 10% protein, and zero carbohydrate, and then you're over consuming calories. Like I said, that's extremely dangerous for your health. The what we call the lean tissue wasting, the sarcopenia effects, things like that of low protein intake, and then essentially no high energy output consumption of carbohydrates. I mean, that's not good life sustaining diet, especially if you at the end of the day are still in a calorie surplus with it, right? Conversely, consuming 70-80% carbohydrates and just stuffing your face with carbohydrates all day long, and spiking your insulin and having all these kinds of radical issues there. I mean, we cannot. There's got to be a fine line between letting people, give credit to a diet. To what extreme are they following this diet? So we've got to be careful with allowing the radicalness to the diet to take over their life hack. We've got to hone in on getting them to take on personal responsibility. Like, look, you can eat like a normal person. You've just got to own it. You don't have to be radical. You're not special in terms of what's going on in your body. Just get responsible, take ownership, and you can eat quote unquote normal, which would be USDA guidelines. Like right. You can be a normal person,
right?
But you've got to be gentle with it, because in today's society, with how everything can be taken as an attack, and especially some cultures, food is love kind of mentality. So it's honestly a touchy subject. I mean, it's very intimate to people. It's talking about food with people is literally like talking about their sex life. I mean, honestly.
Absolutely. And we all understand whether explicitly or just something that we know to be true is there's a high psychological and emotional component to our food and to our eating habits. There really is. And that's something that people don't seem to really want to discuss. It's more along the lines of, oh, well, you have to eat to live. You have to eat to survive. And part of what you discussed, the obesity epidemic, the health concerns that are all related to lifestyle issues, namely the food choices that we're making and the quantities of food that we're making, of what we're eating. It all comes down to that psychological side. Like you said, to me, there are many different directions that we can talk about, but it really comes down to a lack of intentionality, a lack of discipline. So, if I had to sum up the majority of the different fad diets and etc., and certainly the ones that we've discussed today, they're based on the concept that tries to oversimplify things, and that's where that pendulum really starts to swing.
Yes.
It's like, I don't want to be conscious of what I'm eating. I don't want to be disciplined. I don't want to be intentional. So let me tell you these one or two very simple rules, and then you can do whatever you want outside of that. It's like,
Right.
it's like, okay, carbs are bad. So as long as you don't eat carbs, you can eat whatever you want. And then, and when I first found out about the low carb craze, I'm seeing stuff, and I'm seeing stuff on the internet and whatnot, and they're talking about people who are like just consuming huge amounts of fat, saturated fat. They're over consuming like really rich sources of like cheese and dairy and meat products, and it's like, I can eat all the ribeye steaks and bacon, cheese that I want, and it becomes an overindulgence. It's like, as long as you don't eat carbs, you can have free will to do whatever you want, and you will still have that beach body that you're looking for. And to me, it's just not true. And it all comes down to that, what you said about the psychological side is, I don't want to be accountable for it. I want something that's very simple. And to me, that's what all of the quote unquote fad diets fall into. So on one hand, you have that extreme lack of discipline, but then on the other side, you have that extreme teeth grinding, gritty willpower type discipline that says that, hey, for the next 30 days, I'm gonna have clear broth and juice, and that's gonna be all of my nutrition for the next 30 days. And that's where we start talking about, I don't know if it came by way of like the celebrity diets and stuff like that, but that's where I first started hearing about, oh, well, so-and-so looked great on the red carpet the other day. What did she do? Oh, well, she did a juice cleanse. It's like, oh, yeah, I need to do a juice cleanse. And it sounds good, looks good, but at the end of the day, and this goes back into what we talked about in our last episode, just about goal setting. You have to understand your goal. You have to have a plan in order to be intentional. And that's what tells you how you should be eating in order to reach that goal. So the thing is, whatever celebrity lived off of juice for a couple days just to fit into that dress and look good for that photo shoot, that's a temporary state.
Right.
So it was an extreme calorie reduction that had an extreme result for a temporary state. So in terms of goal setting, in terms of psychology, it makes no sense that me, the person who wants to lose X amount of pounds and keep it off permanently, would do anything that results in a temporary condition. It just doesn't make any sense. It defies all logic. Everything that we've talked about so far comes back to just the simplicity of it all. And for whatever reason, we don't want to accept that, because if I accept that nutrition really is a matter of calories in, calories out, and making reasonable, sensible choices, and that the real problem is that I'm just not disciplined to do it, well, now the problem is with me.
Bingo.
It's like, hold on, don't point that finger at me. It's my metabolism, it's my genetics, it's the fact that my gut doesn't digest sugar properly, so I have to eat more of it in order to get what these are all excuses. At the end of the day, if I can accept the fact that I'm responsible for my condition on some level or another, and like you said, regardless, even if there is an underlying medical concern, that it's still, at the end of the day, is calories in, calories out. What are you consuming? What is your body using? And that determines whether we are gaining weight, losing weight, or maintaining. And it really does come down to that. But
right. And it's important that when we bring this up, especially when we're talking to the person who's struggling with this, is that we don't wag the finger and tell them, look, you're ignoring the facts and start getting hostile with them. We bring it up in a positive manner, right? It's like, look, this issue is yours. There's no excuse for it. It's on you, but we tell it to them in terms of this is good news. It's your fault because you are 100% in control and have all the power to change this. It's never this demonizing like, oh, this is your fault. It's no, this is your fault. So that's good news. You can change this today, and you can do it all by yourself, and you don't need to wait on a doctor's visit or an appointment, or there's nothing to wait on. You can literally do this now. This is awesome news that it's your fault, right? That's the best thing that you should hear, is that it's 100% within your power. And going back to the celebrity diets, it's just like exercise, and we'll come back around, I'm sure, soon with exercise and how it does this. But I see it a lot in the sports performance world of the house with exercise, because in the sports performance world, everything's advanced and the latest, greatest, newest, and everyone wants to make their own name. And so what we see here is getting credit where credit isn't due. That happens a lot with new exercises and routines, but it's also seen in diets, right? So when we have a celebrity put out their new diet on Instagram, what do? They build a community. Hey, everyone join this challenge. Everyone get involved. There's a Facebook page. Everyone send your stats, send your updates, send this, send that, send the other. 30 days, and they have incredible results. And they almost did it right, and then they screw it all up by saying, I got better on this diet, rather than giving credit where credit is due by, hey, I had a community that held me responsible. I sent in my updates. I sent in my discipline. I had people talk to me. I had a strong social interaction. Imagine if instead of everyone being selfish and saying my diet did it, or everyone being selfish and saying my exercise program did it, if everyone would stop being selfish and give credit to the whole, like, look, the credit is due because of the social implications that we've brought together, the community that we brought together, the high compliance that we brought together. That's where this came from. We encouraged this person in hard work. Could you imagine if people just took on the mentality that they just needed the encouragement and could do it 100% on their own rather than relying on a diet? I mean, that's how we end obesity. Again, every single diet has had its time to shine for multiple years, and the trend is still upwards, right? So facts, history, and research shows us that what we're doing and what we're focused on is not working, right? The focusing on the dieting is not working. We need to focus and shift elsewhere, to communities, to compliance, and to personal responsibility.
Right, absolutely. And basically what you said about having that community, that accountability, that discipline, for me, it all comes down to building and maintaining productive habits. And that's where we have those specific goals, the micro goals. And once we set our direction with our goal statements, then it's a process of just building those productive habits that slowly and surely get us toward those goals. It really is that simple. Having the community to help support us along that journey is very important, but it's all that becomes one of the habits that leads to our success on the journey. But it really is just a matter of building those productive habits. Now, we talked about the psychological side and taking ownership of our health, taking ownership of our nutrition programs. And you use that term psychosocial, and I think that's a good segue into something else that I want to talk about. And I'd like to get your thoughts on what I would call spot reduction, spot building. And let me specify exactly what I mean. And it's not just females by any means. We have males who think that they can just gain weight in their arms and chest and not gain it in their stomach or anywhere else that it will deposit. But I think it's more prevalent and it's more destructive when on a social level we really want to see voluptuous females with these God-given assets that they just happen to deposit their weight in certain places that are, highly praised in our society. But at the same time, just like we keep coming back to the calorie surplus, calorie deficit, it's not possible to just gain weight in the areas that you want to gain weight in. It is not possible. But go ahead. Do you have any thoughts on spot reduction or anything like that?
Yeah, so let's acknowledge the closest thing that we can get to spot reduction, spot increases. The closest thing, right? Fat burning is a systemic process, right? So it's system wide, and it comes from system wide utilization, right? So if I'm doing a lot of aerobic work on my lower body and I'm upregulating fat utilization, this fat isn't necessarily coming from fat deposits in my legs. It's coming from the whole system. It's coming from the body. Right now, however, there is some evidence in the literature out there that the body will preferentially take fat from the midsection, which is just a human thing, right? That's our storage area, right? Yes, we store it everywhere, but there are areas that's quote unquote storage, right? That's why everyone's worried about their gut, because that's preferentially where things are put sometimes, but also preferentially where it's initially taken from. Now, whether it's because it's the stomach that's preferenced, or because it's just the human body has the most adipose tissue there, so that's where it's coming from. Don't really know, haven't really looked into it that much, but we do know that we preferentially use and store from the stomach region generally. As with gaining, obviously we can have localized hypertrophy, right? We do focus on big compound movements, but bodybuilders aren't fake. If we spend a lot of time working the biceps, a lot of time working the glutes, we can have more hypertrophy of the muscle tissue there, and from a hyper focus, we can have a response in making these muscles bigger. Now, the issue with that is you get the 16-year-old scrawny kid focused on doing bicep curls rather than big old deadlifts, bench press. We forget that you don't start where the professional's at. You start where the professional came from, right? So, whole nother story there, but that's about as much credit as we can give to spot reduction, spot increasing. Obviously, there's implants. Implants is becoming huge, like body wide. I mean, we're talking like oil injections and things like that. There's a lot of weird stuff out there, but the only thing that we see evidence based is a little bit of preference from the stomach, and then obviously localized hypertrophy from resistance training.
Right. And it's just the focus on spot increase. Of course, we can readily think about cases where people would like to spot reduce, but it's not really worth spending a whole lot of time on. But what is the what's that substance, the oil, the synth, is it synthvol or something, that whatever it is that these guys are injecting directly into the muscle to make the muscle huge, but it's obviously not a natural result of what you said, the hypertrophy. Like it's comical in some cases to see what some of these guys will do to make it look like they've earned the body of a person who has spent the time and effort and everything of building that body.
Yeah.
Like we just want to get it by injection or implants or whatever. It's just comical.
Yeah, I mean, they still don't even look good. They just look weird and awkward. They're either like scrawny people with some sort of tumor growing on them, or they're heavy set with some other weird tumor coming out of their neck. I haven't really looked much into it. Not a big interest to me, but the most of the literature I've seen is, in literature, I don't mean evidence-based. I mean those respected that have written articles is about as far as I've gone into it, and it's These oils develop a lot of scar tissue in the body, and there can be a lot of poisoning effects. And it's just a bad road to go down with health. And obviously, it's if for those that don't know what we're talking about, if you see these oil injected muscles, you'll clearly understand that it is 100% a psychological issue, not them trying to get an extra edge. I mean, it's really a sad state, but just the oils is an extreme example of just not focusing on the grind, the mature vision, the hard work, the lifestyle. Just be patient, do some work, and watch miracles happen.
And reap the benefits the way that they are supposed to be reaped.
Right.
So just we gotta get into a couple questions.
Okay.
So I'll let you take the first stab at this one. You can go any way you want with it, but what is the best and worst nutritional advice that you've heard?
The worst nutritional advice. I'll go broad with it, because it's just appalling how we can almost get something perfect and then just totally ruin it. So the CrossFit epidemic, which has been a huge blessing in the fitness world, they are a highly anaerobic, highly high energy output, exercise routine or sport for those that get to that level. Just a high octane, high output workout, right? Obviously there's some things that we don't agree with there, and we just kind of like shake our head like, what are you thinking doing stuff like this? But from a nutritional standpoint, it really makes you drop your jaw when the CrossFit community promotes and takes up a Paleolithic and a ketogenic based dieting. Like even though putting bias out there, I don't agree with high fat diets to this extreme, but even if you were a supporter of it, it's just jaw dropping and really hard to wrap your mind around, like why you would promote something that requires such a heavy dose on glycogen, carbohydrate, muscle stored energy as CrossFit training. And then the one thing that you tell them to do is to stop the carbohydrates and increase the fat and minimize the protein. I mean, it's just, and then on top of that, tell this person who's training a ridiculous amount to only eat within an 8-hour window. I mean, you're begging this person to have rhabdomyolysis. You're begging them to just seize up and kill themselves. It's frustrating to see as a whole, like how, again, just going back to the basic understanding of fats, carbs, proteins. If you knew nothing more than that, you'd be like, oh, a CrossFitter should be consuming his carbs and consuming his protein, like it should just be like that's what he should be doing. But what we're seeing is this push for, you increase your fat and increase your bacon intake and all this. It's like, good Lord, like they're already doing a mass amount of high intensity work, and some of it's even bastardized, and whatever, we can hate on that at another time, and that just amplify and magnify the issue. You want them to abstain from a higher carbohydrate intake. It's like, where was this disconnect? How did we get you there? So that's the biggest thing in terms of as a whole, as a systemic process. I just am baffled that the advice and the media out there has been able to successfully distort it this way. It's just mind blowing.
So before we move on, what do you attribute? I mean, we all know CrossFitters who have phenomenal bodies, and what you're telling me is it's not as a result of these nutritional habits. It sounds like you're telling me it's actually in spite of these nutritional habits that we intuitively wouldn't say would lead to the performance and the appearance that this person has been able to achieve. So what do you say to that? because the person in the gym, the person in the box, in the CrossFit gym, they're looking at that CrossFit god across the room who eats paleo and says, I want to be like that person.
Right. So to that person, you've got to understand, like, look, you're not them. You whether if we're talking like a games level athlete, well then, that's the same argument we have for all professional athletes. Like, we can't take on what they promote and support, because they could go on the Krispy Kreme diet and still probably put out some ridiculous, insane athletic feats. So we can't compare ourselves to where these freaks are at. But even, let's go to like just the hot stuff guy that's in your gym who's not a high level athlete. I would just say that, again, if you're not him and you're not at his status, you don't know what's going on with him personally, unless you know him to the T. But you need to start with the basics. If you're a beginner, like if you want to take yourself to that next level and you want to make sure you're doing it healthy and you're sustaining and you're performing, then you need to make sure that you're getting the basics down and staying within this rational mindset. And then the second thing I would say is, yeah, he's awesome. Yeah, he's rocking it. But then I would always go back to, what could he be? Sure, it's working for him, but is it the best thing that's working for him? Yeah, he's a stud right now, but is he being held back? Like, perhaps he could be a better stud. So just like, this goes back to my philosophy, like, just stop comparing yourself to others, number one. But that's something for another time. But it's a loaded question to be like, well, he's doing it. It's like, well, I mean, cool, he's doing it, but I mean, the same questions I'm going to ask you, I could ask him, right? The same questions I'm going to ask you are like, are you performing optimally? Let's put everything in a row to make sure that you're performing optimally. When I go up to this stud, as a coach, I'm going to say the same things. Like, are you performing optimally? Cool. You're the hot shot in this class right now, but let's put you up against 20 other hot shots like you, like, maybe you need to up your game as well. So that's why it's dangerous to compare yourself to others, because you're not, you're comparing apples to oranges, one, but it's the questions that I have for you are the same for the stud. Everyone can be optimized. So don't think that he is like high and mighty and perfect.
Right. Absolutely. And if I had to answer that same question, I would say, and I hope this doesn't sound like the cop-out answer, but I talked about it a little bit already, but I'll reiterate the fact that food is enjoyable. We have it on a psychological level, on an emotional level. We are supposed to enjoy our food. Some people enjoy their food more than others. However, if you try to adopt any type of nutrition plan that does not allow you to enjoy food, that's not a sustainable plan in my mind. So this kind of, and that's why I said I hope it doesn't come across as a cop-out, but it really puts a smear on any of the extreme diets, any of the diets that demonize any type of macro or any ingredient. Or for example, for a person who really loves sugar, and there's a lot of hype about the sugar debate and stuff, and we're not able to cover all of that today. But for a person who loves dessert, it's not reasonable for me to tell that person, hey, you will never have another chocolate chip cookie. You will never have another pastry. You will never have another slice of cake if you want to achieve this look that you're going after. That is not reasonable. That is not necessary. The fact of the matter is, if you tell a person or if any person tries to adopt a nutrition plan that doesn't allow them to enjoy the food they're eating, that is not a sustainable plan. I don't care how strong your will. I don't care how disciplined you think you may be. I don't care any of that. You are not going to stay on that program for as long as it takes to achieve and maintain the goals that you're looking for. So it just kind of, to me, that talks to any of the extreme diets. So in contrast to that, what is the best nutritional advice is basically what you said in the very beginning. It's about balance. Everything is about balance. You balance out your macros, you balance out your workout, you balance out every aspect of your fitness and nutrition program, which allows you to enjoy that pastry or that dessert or whatever it is on occasion. Now, if you have a very specific goal, like, hey, I want to get super lean for the summer or for a specific reason, if you have an athletic competition that you're training for or whatever, well, now we understand that this is a temporary condition. And while you're training for that event or for that condition, okay, maybe you shouldn't have that dessert. But once you have trained for, completed, and achieved that goal, okay, now let's get back to a more sensible plan that we can stick to for the long haul. Right. So that is, and it really is that simple for me. That's why I don't want to seem like I'm avoiding the question, but to me, it really is just that simple.
No, that's not a cop out. That's truly what it needs to be. We can't have everyone on the same diet. There's people that I talk to that they'll walk out of the conversation and they'll have my blessing to continue to drink their Cokes, because they're just not ready for that step. Conversely, there's somebody else who's just, we are like down to the macro and calorie. It depends on where you're at and what you're ready to take on.
Right. So as we get ready to try and wrap up, we exposed a lot of things. We asked a lot of questions. So at the end of the day, for anyone listening to this podcast, what is the solution? What is the answer? We asked a lot of questions. So what is the answer? In the midst of all the information that's out there, all the hype and the diet plans and all of that, like what can we boil it down to? If there was just one thing that we said, hey, if you only take away one thing from this podcast, please take away this, what would that be for you?
Rational, not radical. Portion sizes for your goal. Watch out for the radical diets. Just stay away from them. That's it.
It's just that simple. And I would take your main points and I would add to it. Just be sensible and enjoy your food. Food is meant to be enjoyed. If you're not enjoying it, you're doing something wrong. Right. That's all there is to it. Yeah. Now, if your enjoyment of food gets out of balance and you're not meeting your goals, well, now we have to get it back in balance. But enjoy your food. That's what I would say.
Definitely. Let's we'll have to do another one focused on nutrition because we didn't even get to touch the sugar debate. Nope. And I want to dive in. I think kind of recorded notes, if you will. I want to dive into some sugar next time for everybody, and then focusing on fasting and intermittent fasting and these feeding periods that we can spend a good 30 minutes on just sugar and eating frequency alone, I think.
Absolutely.
So, all right, perfect.